What's up, Mets fans? Welcome to an early morning Mets hot stove on this football playoff Sunday. How's everybody doing on X and on YouTube as well, guys? Well, we're getting closer and closer to spring training, and yet the Mets still have all these holes. The Mets still have a lot of work to do, and there's still a ton of free agents and trade market possibilities for the Mets to fill those holes. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I kind of like this time slot here early in the morning on a Sunday. Get the action going early. I mean, we got a lot to talk about really with the reports, surrounding the Mets and these free agents, and also that big signing that almost went unnoticed during that Bears-Packers game with Bregman going to Chicago. We'll talk about that here in just a second. For a whopping $35 million a year, and there's some deferments on that contract as well. So no, I'm doing really well. Try to get in, get out before these playoff games. I appreciate everyone being here in the live chat, whether you're on YouTube or X. Let's have some fun. Let's talk Mets.
Yeah, so again, we all know that Cody Bellinger has been a hot topic for a while now. We have been noticing that the Mets and Yankees seem like not saying the only two options, but the best options for him. And we know that the Yankees apparently gave him an offer. If it was 5 years, 150, 160 million, we do know that it was something. And if he thought he can get better, he wouldn't sign with the Yankees, or at least with that contract offer that they supposedly offered him. And now we heard reports that the Yankees are like, you know what? We're not trying to deal with you with a 6-7 year deal, because that is still what he is asking for. So we know the Yankees aren't at that 6th or 7th year, and they're probably at 5. Maybe they would go 6, but they're clearly not going 7. And I think we all believe the Mets are probably not going to go 7 years either. So it begs the question, Chris, are the Mets the favorites to land Cody Bellinger now, even though they're probably not going to go to 6 or 7 years? Or, you know what? They're putting the blindfold on us, and you know what? They're going to spend and they're going to give years, because it doesn't make sense that the Mets are in on all the top free agents in pitching market and the outfield market, and these guys are actually going to take short-term deals. What do you think?
Well, I mean, if you remember last week, and I posted a couple of short clips about it when I said who's more likely between Tucker and Bellinger to come over to the Mets, I always said it was Bellinger, because the Yankees aren't going to close that gap on Bellinger, especially given the asking price of what Scott Boras has already set as a precedent. And I think the Blue Jays are a lot more likely to give into the demands of Kyle Tucker than the Yankees are to give into the demands of Cody Bellinger. And we know that, we know the differences of the players. We're not going to get really into that. We know that the bat of Kyle Tucker is a lot better and more consistent when you take in the sample size of both careers than Cody Bellinger, but Cody Bellinger has that positional versatility, and he's also coming off of a really good year in the Bronx, especially with that short porch. But, nonetheless, I think that the asking price of what's being reported, at least from Bellinger and Scott Boras' side, is ridiculous. I mean, I don't even think it's even, well, let me backtrack. With the Bregman deal, it makes sense that they're asking for what they're asking for now, because Bregman just made 35 a year, and that's what Cody Bellinger is seeking, maybe even more so in the 36 or 37 range for a longer term deal. I think you'll get the AAV, and I think that's no problem. And as we all know with the Mets, they don't care about handing out high AAV contracts. They just don't want to give 4, 5, 6 years that these players are asking for, right? If Bellinger wants 35 a year, 36, 37 for 3 years, maybe an opt-out there for him to retest the market again, sure, the Mets are probably the favorites in that aspect. But I don't see Cody Bellinger signing anytime soon unless him and Boras really tone down what they're asking for. And we've seen this before, Scott Boras and his clients. I mean, they'll take this to the very end, right? They'll take this into February if they have to. And we saw it with Pete Alonso, and they'll just do that. And that's why I'm always like, Tucker's going to sign first, because Boras is just really stubborn in that aspect. So I do think that the Mets at this point are in a really good position to wait things out. And this is the strong suit of David Stearns. He doesn't care if he has to wait out Scott Boras. He will do it, right? He will do it. And that's where they can strike gold here on this market moving forward. So I do think that the Mets are very well positioned for Cody Bellinger, a little bit more so than Kyle Tucker at this point. But clearly, given the gap of the deal and the structure that Cody Bellinger was seeking with the Yankees negotiations, it's going to be the same thing with the Mets and the years. That's really just going to be the problem here. So I don't think a deal is going to be imminent for Cody Bellinger anytime soon. I could be wrong, but that's where I see things playing out here with the bats that are on the market between Tucker and Bellinger.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because it's a huge gamble by David Stearns. Yeah, his specialty is to wait it out, get the best deal possible, and he looks like a genius when he gets that done. But if he waits too long and they end up not being New York Mets, whoever it might be, Bellinger, Tucker, let's say Tucker goes to the Blue Jays and the Yankees come around, just like they did with Max Fried, just like they did with other free agents in years past. Eventually somebody's going to break. And I do have a feeling that the pressure is going to be on the Yankees, honestly, more than the New York Mets at this point, because again, I think Met fans kind of fell out of favor with David Stearns and they don't expect anything to go right. So I don't think there's pressure on David Stearns at this moment. I truly think the fact that David Stearns is waiting this out, I think it's a big gamble, especially after you broke up the core and now you're doing this. Where I'm not saying to give Cody Bellinger 7 years. By no means am I saying that. I don't even think he deserves 7 years. But when you're this in on a player, just like the Mets are in on Kyle Tucker and Framber Valdez and so on and so forth on the free agent market, you can't always get the best deal. You can't always get the deal you want to give to a player. It's just that simple. Sometimes you have to go to extra year, like the Yankees did with Max Fried, with Dylan Cease with the Blue Jays, with Alex Bregman with the Cubs. He's a year older than Cody Bellinger. Now, I believe that Alex Bregman is a totally all-around different, better player, especially offensively as well, but he is a year older. So, and that is why probably Bellinger is looking now. He's definitely going to be asking for a 6 or 7 year deal because he's a year younger. 6-7 years is kind of where Bellinger frame is. And just think $35 million a year is probably where I thought Bellinger would be, in around the $28 to $32 million range. But again, because he's a versatile player, because he can play multiple positions, and Bregman can probably only play third, maybe first in a pinch, Bellinger has that value to some teams, like the New York Mets. That is why I think the Mets are going to end up paying Cody Bellinger, in my opinion. I don't think they're going to land Kyle Tucker. I think the Blue Jays are going to be very aggressive, and it's getting later and later. They're trying to get the best deal as well. But what we know between the Mets and the Blue Jays is the Blue Jays are willing to go the extra mile. The Mets are not, at least until not this point, when it comes to Tucker or Bellinger at this point. Obviously, I think we all would probably like Kyle Tucker more because he is a better all-around player. Especially, I think people see the dynamic in Kyle Tucker. But when it comes to what Stearns talks about and preaches, Bellinger fits his team like a glove. And that is the problem that I continue to fall into when it comes to waiting around and hope the Mets do something. Now, I think we all believe at this point the Mets are going to get a starting pitcher. But when it comes to the outfield, I know David Stearns really likes Carson Benge, but Carson Benge is a huge question mark. Cody Bellinger is proven. Kyle Tucker is proven. It gives you a backup plan if Carson Benge isn't good, at least not right away. Because you can't throw away 2026 and the possibility of these guys going elsewhere, because for all we know, Bo Bichette might be a Philly in a week, right? These teams are getting better as well. We only talk about the Dodgers because they won the World Series. But you know what? The Phillies land Bo Bichette. They're already better than us without Bo Bichette. They get Bo Bichette, they're that much better. The Atlanta Braves are having a sneaky good offseason, and they're getting healthy. Like, we should be looking at our division more than actually the Dodgers at this point, because I tell you right now, the Mets got to do something here, especially in the outfield. They have to do something, right? I'm not going to be mad if it's Bellinger or Tucker, right? Obviously, I'd be happier with Tucker, but I'm not going to be mad. Bellinger will be a welcome addition. Besides Juan Soto, we had nothing really good in the outfield, to be quite honest with you. Nimmo was a disaster, in my opinion. I know he was a solid ball player, but he never fit this team the way he was supposedly supposed to fit this team when he became this quote-unquote power hitter, which is not a power hitter in his numbers. He was a totally different ball player, and it messed up the dynamic of what this lineup should have been, and it messed up our 1-2 possibilities, and it was just all over the place. It didn't fit, but Bellinger just does. You can fit Bellinger in so many different positions, right? He's a guy that could hit for average. He's a guy that puts the bat on the ball. He's a guy that plays great defense, And, you can bat him second, you can bat him fifth, you can bat him third, you can bat him in a lot of places, Chris. And Tucker, same thing. But I feel like Tucker, I don't think he's going to play left field, to be quite honest with you. With Juan Soto playing left field for the Dominican Republic in the World Baseball Classic, that's more of a possibility. And I don't know if I want to ruffle that tree right now when it comes to Juan Soto, because right now, let's be honest, Juan Soto is in a fragile state with the New York Mets, with the whole thing with the situation with Lindor and them, and who knows if that's really a big deal or not. But to ruffle the feathers already, that you already, blew up a bomb in this organization already with the core going elsewhere, it's going to be very interesting, because it depends on what David Stearns really needs, Chris, or wants in this aspect, right? We know what we want. We talk about it all the time. We know what people say in the comments, but it's what David Stearns wants. But we always ask the question, Chris, will he ever go a little bit above and beyond and out of his comfort zone to sign the best players on the market, or at least one of them? That is the question that we're trying to answer right here,
Yeah, and that's a great point. And first of all, with the Juan Soto discussion, I don't think he's moving off of right field for quite some time. So either Bellinger or Tucker. I mean, Tucker can play left field. It's just that that's the one aspect of these two guys that definitely is a little bit of a question mark. But I think if it came down to it, I think that they would just put Tucker in left field and just call it a day, especially when you have that offense from both of those guys in your lineup. At that point, the defense is what it is, but that goes against the David Stern strategy at that point, right? I mean, prioritizing defense. And so that's where Cody Bellinger is the better fit. But also between these two guys, it's like, one is 28 years old and one is 30 years old. So, if you are, and we know that if you are overpaying and going the extra mile, like you just said, it's going to be for Kyle Tucker. You don't do that for Cody Bellinger, right? Yeah. At least I don't think that you would do that. Maybe 4 years he comes away with. Maybe it's a similar structure to something that Bregman just signed with the Cubs. I don't know. But yeah, I agree with you. It's going to tell us a lot moving forward, especially in the next coming weeks. When this new year hit in the first stream that we did a week and a half ago, I said everything that we need to know about the Mets in 2026 is going to be very evident by the time February comes, given all these guys already off the board, right? If Bellinger signs, if Tucker signs, etc., if some trades happen, if the market is basically at a close at that point, we will know where the Mets stand because of what's going to happen in the outfield and the prospects and the role that they're going to play on this team. If the Mets don't come away with a guy like Bellinger or Tucker, they probably will go ahead and trade for an outfielder, I would imagine, but it's going to be to a lot lesser of a degree, and it's going to be more so of a veteran presence, right? I mean, you could say maybe Robert Jr. is still on the minds of, the Mets, and that's fine. He's a little bit younger, but we know that the offense hasn't quite been there. A lot of Mets fans, shout out to the guys that are also doing Mets content, always this running joke about Austin Hayes is like a veteran presence kind of guy. But these are guys, and you also had way back when this offseason was like full throttle during the winter meetings, the trade discussion surrounding Jake Myers over there in Houston. Like, these guys have been around the block already and are more so veteran presence, even though I know Robert's like, 27, 28 years old, whatever, but they've been in the MLB for quite some time. They are more veteran guys to put as insurance, like you said, while giving Carson Benge the full opportunity in 2026 to play a huge role. And if you are telling me that you are going to let Carson Benge be your opening day left fielder with Tyrone Taylor playing center field and Juan Soto in right field, I'm just going to tell you right now, that is not by definition of how you went about things in the offseason. That is not going full throttle and contending or trying to contend in 2026 when you had the options of a lot of other outfielders, especially right now, Bellinger and Tucker, for the taking on the market. I would much rather see a Juan Soto, Cody Bellinger, or Kyle Tucker corner outfield with Carson Benge Let him be the starting everyday center fielder. Tyrone Taylor is a great backup insurance to Carson Benge if things don't go as planned in his rookie season. But given the offense that you have on both sides of the corners there in the outfield, that provides a lot more insurance than banking on Carson Benge killing it in his first season and giving you ultimate production and also going out there and trading for a guy like Robert Jr. or Jake Myers, right? It's a clear plan A versus plan B. And if you're going the plan B route, I'm excited because Carson Benge is going to get his opportunity, but you cannot deny, no matter how much you believe in these prospects, you cannot deny that that is going into 2026 with another question mark. And the same thing can be said about the rotation in relying on Brandon Sproat, Jonah Tong, etc., to come back full throttle and be a night and day difference maker in this rotation. So yeah, it's going to tell us a lot depending on what happens with Tucker and Bellinger. If the Mets miss out on both of these guys, which I also still think is a very likely possibility, if David Stearns isn't willing to go the extra mile, like you just said, for one of these names, then we're going to be seeing a lot of Carson Benge, which I have no problems with. But then we have to come to terms and come onto these streams and do our podcast talking about this being a competitive. I don't like to throw the word rebuild around, but let's be honest. If you are relying on all these prospects moving forward with some veteran presence like Soto, like Lindor, you can call it a retool. You can call it a rebuild. All of these are fair, really. All these terms are fair, but there's a lot of question marks around the diamond at that point. So if the Mets and David Stearns really want to sell fans that this is going to be a year that they are serious about contending for the NL East and the National League, there's still going to be a large gap between the Mets and the Dodgers and everybody else in the Dodgers. I think everybody understands that. But closing the gap, at least in your division, like you just said, the Phillies automatically, even still, are probably the favorites in the NL East right now. The Braves have had a little bit of a sneaky offseason, especially early on, and especially if they get healthy, because that was the one thing that plagued them last season in a down year. When they get healthy, they're still a really good team. The Marlins, I know they just parted ways with Edward Cabrera, but the prospect that they got back is probably going to be vying for a position out there in the outfield, and they still have a good rotation even still, and their offense is a little bit underrated. They're going to be right there, just like they were in 2025 down the stretch with the New York Mets. So the NL East is no joke. And I think before we start talking bigger picture here of the National League, we have to really sit back and evaluate. The NL East is also no joke, and the Mets are sitting there right in the middle of the pack, unfortunately, right now as it stands, and they need one of these names to take them over the top to be able to compete with the Phillies and the Braves for the course of 162. And we'll see if David Stearns does it. I think that's what everybody's question has been moving forward into this offseason as it progresses. Will David Stearns pull the trigger and make a move on one of these big names, even if it takes a 4 or 5 year deal to get it done? We've only seen 2 and 3 year deals. Will that change? Time will tell, but it needs to happen if they want to take these guys away from their respective teams that are pursuing them, like the Dodgers, like the Blue Jays, like the Yankees. The Mets are big boys. They've got big money. Let's use it a little bit to our advantage. I'm not saying don't recklessly overspend, because the Mets have done that and it hasn't worked out for them. I understand that. But to me, when you're talking about positional versatility with Bellinger or making your lineup infinitely better, as Will Salmon, this is not just coming from my mouth. This is coming from Will Salmon, one of the best Mets reporters and overall MLB reporters, saying that, yeah, this team could be okay. They could be a little bit better than last year, maybe not by much, but you get infinitely better at this point with Kyle Tucker in your lineup than without it. Then that should be a little bit eye-opening about what your move should be. And I think it would be a mistake to let one of these names pass you by. Yeah. And that's just where I'm at right now.
Exactly. But you know what? That casino cost a lot of money, man. I don't know. Cole might be broke at this point, on Roosevelt Avenue over there. But listen, here, look, retool, rebuild, it's all bullshit. It really is, because this is the issue that I have, is that Tucker or Bellinger, but more Tucker, because he's a couple of years younger. Tucker helps you out in the future as well. So these prospects that he loves to talk about and throws to everybody and makes Met fans get excited over nothing, because let's be honest, they're nothing until they prove it. And that's okay. But again, if you sign Tucker, if you sign a Bellinger, or you bring in a starting pitcher, you're locking up spots that could have been for potential prospects that could be playing. And this is what I just don't understand. And we talked about this the last time we had a hot stove. The fact that he talks about these prospects so much, we have about 50 of them in the infield alone, yet every one of them is still on his team, and we still have more in the pipeline. It makes no sense. So let's trade for Simeon, put him in the infield. Let's sign Jorge Polanco. He's also an infielder. Yet we have Vientos, Mauricio, Acuna, Beatty. You want to call Jet Williams. You want to call others. There's too many. And this is what I don't understand. We always talked about it. The Nimmo trade wasn't gradable until we see what the Mets are doing. And right now, this is what, a month and a half later when this all happened. Still, to grade that trade makes no sense because you added another infield to this mosh pit of infielders. And this is where I just don't get it. The prospects, the already the Major League ready team, it's all confusing, to be quite honest with you. And that's why I don't know if it's a retool, rebuild, or he's just throwing shit at the wall and hopefully it sticks at this point, Chris.
That's the problem, is that we don't know, and we probably will not know until maybe even 2027. But like I said, I don't think, and I know you've said this before, I know you're not really high on prospects, but you're not opposed to the idea of letting these prospects play, and neither am I. If the plan is to give these prospects a chance on both sides of the ball, pitching and offense, we're fine with that. You guys need to make decisions, and this front office needs to make decisions on these prospects. If they're going to take the 2026 season to do that and play the long game, 2 to 3 years to let these guys develop and finally, compete down the road, that's fine. But the other residual moves, maybe they make sense, maybe they don't. Like I always said, I had this idea when they signed Polanco, when they traded away Brandon Nimmo and the excess of 2 years to offload that 5-year deal, to onload the Marcus Semien 3-year deal. This is it seems like, barring anything unforeseen with this Kyle Tucker and Bellinger situation, and I don't think they're going to go 4 or 5 years for either of these guys as well, which is why I think it's a realistic possibility that they miss out on both. This looks like a 2 to 3 year plan to me. This doesn't look like let's compete for 2026. And that is the case. We don't care if the prospects play. I'd be excited to go out there and watch a Mets team with these prospects just to see what we finally have and what the best farm system in baseball, quote unquote, is producing. That's fine with me. But, the other moves aligning with that just don't make sense and are not adding up right now. And that's what we're trying to find the answers to at this point. So I was going to also ask you, as it relates to Kyle Tucker, because I don't think this is in the question of Cody Bellinger. Maybe he can do what Pete Alonso did, but I highly doubt it. Especially coming off of a good 2025 campaign, but maybe more so for Kyle Tucker, since he's a little bit younger and has that ability to go back onto the market. Do you see Kyle Tucker taking like a 1 or 2 year deal with an opt-out, like a Pete Alonso deal, maybe one for like $35-40 million, something ridiculous, and just proving himself? Because his time in Chicago, right, the lone season that he wasn't in Houston, that's like that. I don't think that's indicative of who he is, because his numbers in Houston speak for themselves, or speaks for itself. But that season in Chicago might have hurt him more than we actually think. And let's be honest, he's been plagued by injuries the last 2 seasons as well. So maybe it is a possibility that he takes a 1 year deal or 2 year deal with an opt out like Pete Alonso. I don't know.
Well, Chris, I mean, if you're Kyle Tucker, right? I'm take the Met fandom out of it between me and you, right? As fans, if you're Kyle Tucker, if he's going to take a 1 year deal or a 2 year with an opt out, where would you go? LA, right? That's where the Dodgers will jump in, and they'll give him $70 million and defer $60 million of it. Like, they would do that. So if I'm Tucker, why do I have to have the pressure of New York, the pressure of being basically, the third best guy on this team offensively, and being part of the quote unquote core guys now of this team, and deal with all that pressure when I can go to LA and be like the 12th guy on that team and have a great year, opt out, and go back on the market at 29 and get a 7-year deal. You know what I'm saying? So like, this is why it doesn't make sense. And the other reason why with Stearns is, he always talks about the prospects. We would be okay. I'm always okay. If you're going to play the prospects, play them, right? That's fine. We all agree with that. But David Stern's actions, and if you again, Will Simon is one of the best reporters out there. Unless he's completely wrong that the Mets are very much in on Bellinger, Tucker, and top aces in either Tucker, Valdez or in the trade market with a top ace. Those actions that are currently happening, and if the Mets are that legitimately in on these guys, is telling a whole different story. That's what I don't understand. You know what I'm saying, Chris? Like, that's my problem. Like, you want to play the prospects. You want to tell us that would I completely agree with that? No, I'd rather have a 2026 season thinking about a World Series. But if you're going to tell me you're playing the prospects, play the prospects. Don't have these. Don't say that you're going to be in on these guys, because he did say that early in the offseason. He's going to be in on all the big free agents. That's what he said. He specifically said that on the hot stove early on in the offseason. But do something. Either spend the money or make a big trade to make your team better, or play the prospects. That's it. But his words are saying one thing, and his actions, according to these reports, and the best reporters out there, this isn't Andy Martino talking about this. This is Will Salmon, Ken Rosenthal, the best reporters in the business, are saying that the Mets are very much involved in these players. So is it a complete lie? Is Stearns blowing smoke up their asses? Or is it actually true? Because that's the problem. And that's why we're here January 11th. It's playoffs in the NFL. And we're still talking about what is the plan for the New York Mets. Now, Stearns probably has the plan. But honestly, I don't think he knows a direct route where he's going, because you can't be in on these big guys and then still talk about these prospects like there's 100 positions available on this roster, because it's not. You sign, let's say they sign Valdez to a 3-year deal, right? He's going to be here for the next 3 years. Unless you trade a Peterson or a Kodai Singer, you got 7-8 guys that are going to be in your rotation. You know, you're talking about Sproat, that could be a possibility. Who knows if Jonah Tong shows up earlier, early in AAA and pitches well, and then you put him in the rotation. What do you do then? There's so many different options there. What if Carson Benge becomes elite in the minor leagues and you get, he'll probably be here anyway, but what if a Ryan Clifford pops up and just goes crazy at AAA? There's so many possibilities here. And then there's spots that won't be available if you sign a Valdez or even trade for, trading will probably lessen the burden of the prospects, but that's why, if you want to talk about Edward Cabrera real quick, why I would have made that move of Beatty and Ewan just to lighten up the load a little bit. But it is what it is at this point, because.
Where you said you would have made the move? I was going to ask you that too.
Absolutely. Why? Because everybody wanted to throw out Beatty last year. They didn't want him, right? I stood behind him, but I don't trust Beatty. And Ewan is another prospect. This guy wasn't even a top 10 prospect last year. He played extremely well, and now he's in the top 10. So now everybody knows him, when people really didn't. And now they do. I would have. You know why? Because Edward Cabrera can probably bring more to this team than either Brett Beatty and definitely A.J. Ewan. And I'm not saying A.J. Ewan is not going to be a good player. But 90% of the Met fans wanted to kick Beatty out the window last year. And now all of a sudden they wouldn't make this deal. We know the Marlins wanted Brett Beatty for 3 years now?
A long time.
Yeah, for a long time. And once again, if David Stearns is not, now I understand Beatty is kind of your third baseman at this point right now. You're starting third baseman.
So well, they would have had to go out there and get Bregman after they made that trade. If they made that trade, right? They would have had to go out there and probably give Bregman that 5-year deal. So that's basically what you're asking yourself. Do you trade away Beatty and Ewing and go and get Cabrera and Bregman at that point? And that's what it is. Would the
Mets be better today than they are right now?
Oh, for sure. I'm not denying that. That's 100%.
Let's be honest. Edward Cabrera would be on number 2. Everybody wanted to give, pom-poms and flowers to, Clay Holmes with his 3.5 ERA. When Cabrera, and I know he didn't pitch as much, and there is injury concern there, but he's young, he's under control, right? That's what David Stearns love. If you want to talk about future and present, Cabrera fits that mold. But now we're crying about Brett, not you, but in general, Brett Beatty. Like I saw people on Twitter. I know Ibby wouldn't make that deal. I saw his show. I saw what was going on until Mr. was part. I know he wouldn't make that move. I completely understand why. But look, I was a big proponent of Brett Beatty. I always was. I had his back last year. I was pissed off he didn't start game 1 against Valdez in Houston over Acuna when he had a badass spring training. But Beatty is still a big question mark. Like, if this guy flops, we're very much in trouble because we're going to go back to the guy who flopped last year in Vientos. You know what I'm saying? So like Ewan is a guy that, can he be good? Sure, of course he can, right? We're all hyping up these prospects because this is what we always do. When there's no hope, and let's be honest, Met fans don't have hope at this point when it comes to this organization or this team or this roster, we have to rely on something. And the only hope that has a realistic chance of possibly working is the prospect. So that's what we go to. And that's, I think that has been a problem with a long time with Met fans. You know, we always name guys all the time that were top prospects years and years and years. And it's just, I'm not on board with continuing to lose out on players. Because again, these teams are getting better. The Cubs are better. The Phillies are better, especially if they get Bo Bichette. The Dodgers, we know what they are, right? Can we say we're probably hovering around top 10 in the back end of teams in the National League? That's not a playoff team. This is the problem. This is the problem that I have. You wasted another year of Juan Soto in his prime. You're wasting one of the few years left of the prime of Lindor. It makes no sense. You have these guys on your team. You can't waste these years because 3-4 years from now, Lindor is going to be way too old to be even thought about being a top player on this team. And that's if the prospects work out and become those top players along with Juan Soto. But that's a big if. It's a huge risk right now.
Yeah, that Cabrera trade, I spoke on it a little bit. I think it's a combination of not knowing who your third baseman, because like if you get rid of Brett Beatty, you need to go get Bregman or else you are virtually screwed at that position. And I'm not like, that's a lot to bank on to go ahead and make those deals simultaneously. And also a lot of people have issues about the injury history of Edward Cabrera and giving up that, large of a haul for a guy like that is coming off of one of his better career years, but still a lot of question marks left is what has a lot of people not, glad that the Mets didn't make that trade. But I agree with you in the same breath. Like, I think Brett Beatty will be fine. I haven't really been the biggest Brett Beatty proponent, to be honest, because, he had a great season for his standards. But let's pump the brakes on him going out there and giving us 25 home runs and following up a great season with an even better season, because we just need to see it. And we haven't really seen that, enough with Brett Beatty's career thus far. So Brett Beatty, in my mind, I know a lot of people are sold on Brett Beatty. I understand it. I get it. I mean, he's talented, good defense, the bat. Like, if this guy keeps swinging the bat like he did in 2025, he can easily put 25 over the fence without a problem consistently. Sure. And maybe he is just tapping into that potential and he's finally figuring something out. But do we know that yet? The answer is no, until we actually see it again, because the same thing with Vientos, when he, had a great 2024, what did he follow it up with? He got better down the stretch, but it was too little too late for Vientos in 2025. And we know his defense sucks. He's a DH. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's a question mark, too, of what they're going to do with him. Are you committing to him at the DH spot in 2026, or are you going to find a better option to put there and just bank on Vientos? So that's two question marks right there in your lineup. So, yeah, I mean, as it pertains, because these names that we're talking about right now with Vientos, Beatty, et cetera, whatever, when we talk about the names moving forward, like Peralta, I'm not sure in what world the Mets get Skubal the way things are going right now. It's probably close to zero at this point, but Beatty's a name that you save for a guy like Skubal and then figure out that position later. I'm not saying that Beatty would be the guy to go in that trade, but I'm sure they might ask for him in that deal, especially given their infield sort of situation. So, things are fluid. I'm kind of happy, to be honest, the Mets didn't make that move for Cabrera, because like I said, it'd be Bregman or bust at that point, and I just wouldn't be confident in Stearns to swoop in alongside the Red Sox and the Cubs to get that deal done. And at that point, you're virtually screwed. You're going to have to be playing Vientos at third base. You're going to have to give some time to a guy like, who else? Ronnie Mauricio at third base. And that would just be, a little bit disasterful in my humble opinion. So we'll see what happens. I think that what I'm trying to say here as we close out the offensive discussion with Bellinger and Tucker is that it's simple. This is in blatant terms, right in your face. It's simple. The Mets are better, a lot better, with Bellinger or Tucker on the team. That's how you prove to fans that you want to win. And now, that's it. And if you don't, go after these guys and splurge and do what it takes to get them in the doors. More so with Kyle Tucker because he's actually worth it, with what we're hearing he's asking for versus what Bellinger's asking for right now. But if it comes down to it, Bellinger as well. If you're committing to Carson Benge, that's fine. Fans know what it is at that point. We can sugarcoat it all we want. We can make excuses for them all we want. That's fine. But we know you're relying on Carson Benge, which means you're relying on a question mark, which means that 2026 really isn't a contending year. And it makes sense with the Juan Soto contract because he's presumably, unless barring anything unforeseen with that opt-out after the 5th year, he's going to be here for a long time. But then the question becomes, are you maximizing the window of Francisco Lindor? And that's really the biggest question of them all because he's only getting older at this point, right? What is he, like 32 now, I think? Somewhere around there. So let's pivot onto the pitching. Let's talk some pitching because we also did hear about Freddy Peralta, who I've always said going into this offseason, even before the last game was even played out, I said, when this offseason hits, Freddy Peralta and that link between him and Stearns in the Milwaukee days, automatically, I don't care if he's a rental, he's only owed $8 million, for the 2026 season. He is automatically the most likeliest candidate of all the trade and free agent candidates on the market to become a New York Met. And now we're here on January 11th talking about the Brewers wanting a MLB-ready pitcher to replace the production value in their rotation, which the Mets have. It's just if they are going to part ways with them. Jonah Tong's there. I don't think you make that move for Jonah Tong, right? If people didn't want to make it for Joe Ryan, I think Freddy Peralta is better than Joe Ryan, but, I don't think they move Jonah Tong for Freddy Peralta being a rental. Brandon Sproat is an option, 1,000%. I think he's the likeliest of all the options. You'll have Christian Scott if you can convince the Brewers that he's going to come back and be what he was expected to be when he first went down with that injury and he was first coming up. David Peterson is another name that you can toss into this deal that sweetens the pot for them because he is also a quote-unquote rental going into his last arbitration year. And then you have a plethora of prospects that you can, handpick from and open the doors with to start those conversations, let alone MLB talent that can make their lineup better too with Ronnie Mauricio. I'm not saying Luis Angel Acuna is on their radars because I think their infield is mostly set, if I'm not mistaken, but there's options here. Of all the teams around the league, I think the Mets are the best position to give the Brewers what they want. It's not going to be easy because the Brewers really do. This is their bread and butter. This is how they are able to do what they do in cycling these great players in and out of the doors, getting rid of Adames, getting rid of Devin Williams, and still being the National League leaders in the regular season. This is what they thrive, right? This is like the NL version of the Tampa Bay Rays way back when they were doing what they're doing. So this is not a joke, and David Stearns understands that. David Stearns built that team also, essentially, before he came over to the New York Mets. He set them up for that. I think that we can basically all agree on that. Can he get this done? Because I like Freddy Peralta. I want to see Freddy Peralta on the Mets. I think he's a very talented pitcher. I know that he's coming off of also a career year. And maybe some of the other years, a lot of people have question marks about him being that number one alongside Nolan McLean. But there's not many other guys on the market that are available outside of Skubal that will be your top ace, right? That you can consider truly, with the workload of their careers, a top ace. Skeens is not available. We don't know if Skubal's available. We're talking Framber, who's coming off of a subpar year, right? We're talking Freddy Peralta. We were talking Cabrera, who's coming off of a decent year too. Like, these guys are all in the same category. So we can make excuses for each one of these guys not to trade for them or sign them, and that's fine. Then we're going to be running it back with the same rotation in 2025. And is that really what we want? The answer to that is no. Because if I have to go out there and watch another rotation of these young guys, that's fine, but David Peterson, Kodai Senga, Sean Manaea, Clay Holmes, and that combination behind the young guys, I might just lose it because I don't trust in the majority of those names right then and there. So I don't know, Rob. The rotation has always been the biggest question of what David Stearns is going to do, especially if he's going to entrust these prospects in that rotation for the majority of it, or is he going to go out there and use one of them as trade bait like Brandon Sproat for a guy like Freddy Peralta?
Well, how much sense does Peralta make if the Mets don't get Tucker or Bellinger? He's a one-year
Valid
rental,
point too, which is the
right?
same argument for Valdez not signing Valdez. If you don't upgrade the offense,
But
don't get
Valdez
any
will be.
pitching and just run it back.
I think Valdez would be a 2 or 3 year deal. So it sits in line with him being a part of this team for the next couple of years. Peralta won't be, and there is no goddamn way David Stearns is trading for Peralta and not signing him. He's not going to sign him. He's going to be 30 in June. So by the time he's a free agent, he's going to be turning 31 within a couple of months of the season of 2027 starting. So he's going to be 30, 31 years old when he's going to get a contract. Is he going to get 6 or 7 years from David Stearns? No. So here's the problem. This is what we continue to talk about. We head back to it. Why trade a Sproat? Why trade a Tong if you're not going to sign Peralta anyway and you're not signing Bellinger or Tucker? That's what I don't understand. You're filling up spots that doesn't need to be filled when you have guys in your farm system that can fill them, right? And everybody's like, oh, don't trade Tong. I'd rather give Sproat. Didn't Sproat show a lot more than Jonah Tong last year? Sproat actually showed life. Now, he fell apart by the 4th or 5th inning, but there was life there. You've seen that he can be a professional pitcher. Jonah Tong, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I don't like his delivery. I think the reason why people like him is because he has more of a personality than Brandon Sproat. And that's okay. I don't mind him having a personality. But let's not act like Jonah Tong was, lights out. He was not good. Jonah Tong was not good. And I'm not blaming him. By any means, I'm not blaming Jonah Tong at all. It's not his fault that David Stearns fucked up the trade deadline and pushed these guys into positions they shouldn't have been in. But Jonah Tong wasn't good. He was not ready. At least Brandon Sproat showed more signs than Jonah Tong, but yet people are ready to throw him away. You see the problem with that? This is the problem that I have. And maybe you disagree, Chris, right? Brandon Sproat showed something. He can actually get to the 5th inning and not win by 13 runs and look like he's a good starter. Jonah Tong wasn't good at all. Now, we know the stuff that he has, but there's a tremendous amount of pitchers that have great stuff but don't know how to pitch. I don't know if Jonah Tong's going to get there at all. So the people who don't want to trade Jonah Tong, I think it's more of an emotional reaction to his personality than it is what they watched. Sproat was better than Jonah Tong, but everybody's willing to get rid of Brandon Sproat. Why is that? I don't understand that either. So the fact of the matter is, don't get Peralta if you don't land Tucker or Bellinger. That's my opinion, because it's a stupid trade at that point. Everybody bitches and moans about these prospects that they don't want to trade because, everybody wants to get better, but they don't want to do stuff to get better. That's been the Mets fans' MO forever. Oh, I don't want to trade them. I can't trade them. And then bitch and moan when they're losing, and they could have used those guys to help us. But that's the problem, Chris, is that Peralta makes no sense for 1 year as a rental. He's not under control. That's why Cabrera made more sense to make that trade than Peralta. That is why. It's not just about a guy being great or good, or he's an ace or a number 2 or a number 3. Cabrera would have been the second best pitcher on his team, and he would have been under control for whatever idea or plan Stearns has over the next 2 to 3 years. It can be managed with Cabrera being in this rotation. There is no managing, because all you're doing next year is having all these free agents again and all these open holes again, and we're going to be talking not just about a lockout or a strike. We're going to be talking about the 15 holes the Mets have in their organization, in their roster, because they're afraid to sign guys to long-term deals. We can't keep on signing 1 year deals or 2 years with an option when we never have anybody. You can't develop a system here or, a team that you could say, oh, I can put this core around and you can build around it. You can't do that when you 1 or 2 year deals with opt-outs. It just doesn't work.
I agree with the notion of not trading for a rental pitcher if you're not going to upgrade the offense with one more bat. That I can definitely agree with. I don't think David Stearns, like if one of these trades do happen, right, let's just say with Peralta, like I don't think David Stearns, when he's selecting the prospects to give in return, I think he's going to go based off of the trajectory of these pitchers. Like, I mean, these guys had a handful of starts in 2025. Brandon Sproat was, a bit better than Jonah Tong for sure, and he showed a little bit more. But I don't think that's what David Stearns is looking at when making these deals of like 5 or 6 starts of sample size moving forward. And there's the reason why the Twins, when you circle back, earlier this offseason in that Joe Ryan discussion, wanted Jonah Tong. And a lot of these teams do want Jonah Tong if they are going to trade these guys to the New York Mets. And that's a whole separate discussion. We could talk about, the outlook of prospects, on a later stream and the tool set, or skill sets. But yes, I agree with you. And I think, by the way, though, the reason why this could happen is I just get I have the feeling that Peralta's a guy that you can negotiate an extension with in the season, and he might go ahead and just take it, especially with that connection with David Stearns. That deal, like, can we just take a look at that deal that he signed, that extension that he signed with the Brewers? Let me just take a look at his here on Spotrac. He signed this insane, I know this is years ago, I get that, but Freddy Peralta signed a 5-year, $15.5 million contract with the Brewers. 5 years. And this is way back when. I get it. And he's had, multiple good seasons since then. I get it. He was 24 back then. But, like, there's certain players around the league. And Freddy Peralta's coming off of a good season. I get it. But he's also had some questionable numbers in the playoffs. He's had other up and down, spurts in other seasons. It's one of those situations where you get a feel for the difference in the willingness to negotiate a deal and an extension after that 1 year is up. And I think that if you're trading for a rental, Freddy Peralta makes a lot more sense because there's no chance in hell Scooball is signing anything, right? Maybe with the CBA, and you've talked about that, I get it. But even still, that's a big risk, especially when you're talking about the difference in prospects and capital that you would need to give up to get a Scooball versus getting a Peralta. So I hear you, though, Rob. When it's all said and done, if Bellinger or Tucker are not on this team, or another name that we're not talking about that's a very impactful bat via trade is not on this team, why go out there and get a Peralta? Why go out there and get a Scooball? Like, I'm not trading Jonah Tong, Brandon Sproat, Jet Williams plus for Tariq Scooball if I don't have a lineup that I can entrust in on the other side of the ball. It would make no sense. It would really make no sense. The only thing would be that you get maybe first dibs on, talking numbers with him. But even still, there's no way he's going to sign anything without taking a listen to what other teams are going to offer him. And the Yankees recently, with their latest rumor, inquired about Scooball, and they got the sense that it would take half their team to acquire him. And so therefore they just said, let's just give up here. So, and honestly, even a Framber Valdez, even if it is a 3-year for Valdez, if you're not going to upgrade this offense, don't even sign Valdez. I don't even want him on this team.
I agree.
I don't even want him on this team. Don't even make that effort. Just let him go somewhere else. And that's kind of where I'm at. So you need to put your best foot forward on both sides of the ball moving forward. And if you're going to be lagging in on one side of the ball, just forget about the other side. Make this a developmental season and don't BS us anymore, and let's move forward with it. That's really it.
I agree. And I want to put something up that Mike said. You don't trade top prospects for starting pitcher like Cabrera or Gore. Yes, you do. You do. Right? I don't think the Mets were necessarily – I mean, again, the offseason is not over yet. There's still a ton of big guys out there that the Mets can land. So, yeah, at this moment, you do trade it, right? Gore has extremely ace-like potential. Cabrera does too. I think Gore's probably better at this point. And he had a season that it was weird with injuries and not a good season, but you do trade him, right? It's why is everybody else doing it, but the Mets are not allowed to? Because they don't do it, right? 2024 was the time to do it. You were red hot, the best team in baseball from June on, and you could have done it. When this team needed started pitching in June, you could have made it, or even at the deadline, you could have made a trade for starting pitching. That's the time to do it. Stearns, here's the problem, guys. David Stearns allowed this to happen during the season, to have this issue during the offseason in back-to-back years. As I said in the offseason going into 2025, the Mets needed a starting pitcher, a top starting pitcher. What did we need ultimately was a top starting pitcher. Right? David Stearns don't want to trade prospects, so you weren't getting them at the deadline. So when everybody brings up, oh, you can get it at the deadline, not when you have David Stearns. That's the problem. When you could have done it in 24, when his team needed an extra star, they didn't even need an ace. They needed somebody that can, give them some innings and be like a number 3 type of starter. They didn't do that. They didn't do that in 24 when ultimately they overpitched all these starters, which they had to because they were in a tough spot making the playoffs. But you could have added to that to relieve some of that pressure off those pitchers that haven't thrown that many innings in years. And then last year, in the middle of the season, when the Mets could have went out and even get a quality starter, Stearns didn't do that. So when you don't do it during the season, you leave yourself very exposed for an offseason that the Mets currently are having in back-to-back years, in 25 and 26, in the offseasons. This is why we're talking about this, because he never does it during the season. This is why I get upset about this, that, patience and this and that. It's not about patience. It's about the willingness of doing something to make your team better. During the season, you know where your roster is for the most part. You know where you are in the standings. That should give you more motivation to do anything you need to do to make your team better. The Mets were one of the best teams in baseball in the first 2 months of the year. When the pitchers started getting hurt in June, you were still in a really good spot to add to your team at the trade deadline when this team was slowly falling apart, and add a quality starter. Add a quality starter, and they didn't do it. And now you're back to square one again, because luckily Nolan McLean actually showed a pulse and showed brilliance on the mound. We're very lucky, because what if he didn't? Then what are we talking about? Kodai Senga being an ace again? You want to have that conversation again? Because this is the problem. This is why we can never move forward with David Stearns in this aspect. Because when the team is actually winning and the team is actually in a good spot, like they were in 24, like they were in 25, and you had opportunities, you had the prospects to make deals, you half-assed deadlines, you didn't do enough to make your team better when they desperately needed it to, especially last year, because it wasn't the offense that made this team fall apart. It was the starting pitching that ultimately destroyed our bullpen both times, before the deadline and after the deadline. This is the issue, Chris. And this is why I continue to get upset, is because it doesn't make any sense. What the process of what they're trying to do during the season is a really good time to improve your team when you're in a spot that the Mets were in July. They were still in a really good spot in July last year to make them not even a great starter, a quality starter. We probably could have used an ace, but even a quality starter would have gave some innings to this rotation that was desperately needed, instead of throwing, Tom, Dick, and Harry out there that wasn't good and wasting your bullpen away. And, everybody was the scapegoat except for David Stearns in this aspect. And, Mendoza is kind of, a dead manager walking this year, because David Stearns looks like he's setting up a disaster of a team so we can fire Mendoza. So he's throwing his manager under the bus this year. So he's not going to take a blame again. He's going to make Mendoza be the scapegoat when his team wins 75 games. And it just doesn't make sense. It's so stupid. It really does not make sense, because the opportunity has been there 2 years in a row, specifically 2025. Let me not go 2024, because it was a weird year, retooling in 2024 with all those contracts that were tradable contracts that he put together on this roster. But last year, there was opportunity. There was money that was available. There was prospects that were available that you could have got better on this team when this team desperately needed to start pitching, and you didn't do it. And now you come into the offseason with the same holes you might have filled at the trade deadline. Maybe it was somebody that was under control. Now we're talking about guys that are rentals, where we're going to be talking about this in 2027, into 2027 offseason. It makes you know what I'm saying? Like, the reason you sign guys to 3 to 5 to 6 year deals is so you don't have to have this conversation next year in the offseason, in 2026 offseason, talking about all this again, because we talked about it with Alonso, right? We were gonna have this conversation again with Alonso. We knew it was gonna be issues with starting pitching. We knew this going into the season last year, that all these guys, some of them were free agents, some of these guys were not that good. So we were going to have these conversations. You can't keep on filling 2 or 3 spots on your roster every single year. Starters and position players every single year because he's afraid to go long term. So the rentals are just, slowing down the problem that we're going to be talking about next year again. That's why it doesn't make sense. Because he must be banking, or maybe, because again, we don't know his plan. He's got to be banking on Sproat or Tong. But one of those guys are probably going to go in that deal for Peralta or a Scuba, most likely. So, if you're going to put all your eggs in a basket when it comes to Sproat and Tong and them performing well or possibly performing well, then don't make that deal with Peralta then. Like, that's what I just don't understand when it comes to that, because you get Peralta, great. Let's say Sproat is the one that's in that deal. Okay, so Jonathan Tong is still here, most likely. He's not ready right now. He might never be ready. And now you have Peralta, who probably will have a great year in his contract year. And we know David Stearns is afraid to sign anybody long term, even guys that he knows and he developed. So, Chris, I just, there's a huge problem where with David Stearns when it comes to all of this. It's confusing as hell.
It just goes back to that conversation of, is Kyle Tucker going to sign a 1-year deal, right? Right? Like, why? Like, you're going to have the same problem again. That's a prove it year. This is a destination maybe to be a prove it, year for Tucker to go back on the market. But like you also mentioned, like, does he want all the eyes on him to have a lot of the weight on his shoulders of this lineup being successful alongside Soto Lindor? Or would he rather just go to a stacked lineup in LA and just be one, of the regular guys, have a quiet, good season, and then go back and get his money in the market afterward? The same thing with LA. You know that they're going to be the team to trade for Peralta if the Mets don't, because they've got the prospects to do it too. And they don't care if he's a rental. They want to win again. They want a three-peat. So, yeah, I mean, it is tough. It is tough. That's why I don't think that no matter what the Mets do moving forward, like, if they land one of these guys, it's going to either be a rental, it's going to be a short-term deal. And all of this just points back to, especially when you have the Dodgers doing what they're doing, it sucks. But, like, that's why when you have these prospects coming up, I don't think the Mets can afford not to see what these guys have, Rob. Like, I think that it's inevitable that they have to go out there and trust these guys and play the long game. I think the Mets are playing the long game. And I've thought this for quite some time.
Don't get Peralta. Don't get Scuba. Don't sign Valdez. That's what I'm trying to say. Like,
there's a real possibility that they land none of these guys. Like, they don't land any single one of these guys on this list.
Way too much smoke for them to not land one of these guys, because, again, we're going to have the conversation of whoever they get. Let's say Scuba, Peralta, Valdez, whatever. We're going to have the conversation probably on that breaking news stream, stating, or on the next show we do together, stating, okay, now what's the plan? Because if you get Peralta or Terry Scuba, pretty good chance with Scuba, you're probably going to have to lose Tong and Sproat, and I would think. I mean, it'd be hard not to get a deal done there. I mean, maybe not, but one of those guys is going to go for Peralta for sure. Now, if you're so concerned about, or you want to see the long game here, then you should sign Valdez and put Sproat and Tong in the rotation. Trade David Peterson or Kodai Senga. Let these kids go in there while you have a proven guy in Valdez who is very good, who's the top 2 starter, or at least, a number 2 starter at the very least. And you have Nolan McLean, the potential ace of this team. You can do that. Like, that sets you up to be competitive, as Stern says, and provides you the openings you need to put these kids to play and pitch in this rotation. Because I still think Stearns is probably, it's harder for him to trade the prospect pitchers than position players. Then again, he hasn't yet. But, he finally got rid of, he got rid of Drew Gilbert last year, right? Everybody thought that, he was one of those guys that the Mets were going to look long-term, and he was gone for a reliever along with, other guys. But it just shows that, if you fall out of favor with David Stearns, he's willing to do it. It's just a matter of, could he do it? Will he do it? And if the pressure gets, I don't think he cares about pressure, to be honest with you. But maybe the Steve Cohen pressure, because again, even his wife went off social media. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, because Steve Cohen is reactionary. We've seen it with Carlos Correa a couple of years back. We've seen it with Juan Soto and Pete Alonso. He's reactionary. We know he got that deal done with Max Scherzer a couple of years ago. So he's reactionary. And he hasn't done it yet. But if guys start falling off the board and Steve Cohen is like, what's going on here? And then, he jumps in, we all know what's going to happen then. It's going to be whoever's the big guy on the market he's probably going to get, and he's going to do it himself. So he's already stepped over David Stearns' toes last year for sure. And there's no reason why you don't think he can do it again.
I think those days are over, dude. I think this is the David Stearns ship. That's what I think.
We're going to live and die, and David Stearns is not going to have a job in 2 years. I'm telling you that right now, because these prospects better be – one of them better be – now, Nolan McLean, again, it's not like he drafted these guys. You know what I'm saying? Like, these guys have been here. So we're giving him credit for nothing. He's done nothing here. Everybody, people in the stream, in the chat, were talking that I forgot who said it, but it was like, Milwaukee's a juggernaut. Yeah, they're a regular season juggernaut. They don't win nothing in the playoffs. Now, maybe if they have a Steve Cohen type of owner, maybe they would spend more money and add to the team.
Of course they would. That's the blend right there.
But that's the thing though. Like, David Stearns did all he can, but let's not act like he put these guys out there and they were just great when, for years the Central was not good. For years. And the Brewers were, again, it's still what David Stearns has on his resume, but they always choked in the postseason. They always choked. We watched it playing us. They were so much better than us. They did everything better than us, but they found a way to choke, and they do it every year. So if David Stearns is that good, that shouldn't happen. Yeah, it happened time to time, but you know what? Here's what I know. David Stearns in 2024 didn't even believe in that team in 2024. He set it up to trade every guy possible at the deadline. So he didn't believe in that team at all. And clearly at the deadline, he didn't believe in it. They got extremely great play from a lot of players that weren't expected to be good. And they went on a run. 2025, he technically didn't really put this team together for the most part. It was mostly the guys that were already here. And now he's really trying to make this team by breaking up the core, Chris. So, look, I give him all the credit in the world if this turns around and works out in our favor. Because, look, we all want to win. I don't care who does it. If David Stearns gets the credit, if, the guy next door, our neighbor, gets the credit, I don't care anymore. I really don't. We're in the 40th anniversary here of the Mets' last World Championship. I wasn't alive. You weren't alive. Most of us weren't alive. Some of us were alive. My father was alive. It's a long time ago. 40 years, a lot has happened in 40 years. All right? At some point, patience is fine, but you also have to understand your fan base as well. Not saying that you do everything the fan base says, but you also have to understand your own history as well. Can't just be wasting years away. And, that Lindor contract looks terrible now, because if you're going to have this 2 to 3 year retool rebuild, Lindor is a waste. You might as well trade him too. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know if Lindor wants to be here long term. And I know some people might be happy with that. But Lindor, if he thinks this is going to be a possibility, he probably asks for a trade and, approve his no trade clause to a winner, or at least a potential contender, Chris. So I don't know. Like, I hope something happens with the Mets so I have a better idea of what the hell this team's going to look like. So I can either go to spring training excited and go to opening day excited. I do that anyway because, we're nuts. Baseball is baseball. We're still going to watch 162 and think this team's going to win a World Series when, they might not. So, so it is what it is at this point, Chris. I'm just frustrated, man. It sucks.
Yeah, no, I get it. We'll see how this plays out very soon. Hopefully these free agents don't take too long to come off the board. And like I said, with what the Mets do, because there's only so much you can do on the trade market, right? Once these free agents go off the board. So if the Mets don't land one of these free agents, it's going to be nearly impossible. And David Stearns definitely wouldn't do it, especially when we're talking about prospects backfilling all the other holes via trade. That's just not feasible. So we're going to see if like the whole ball game and picture and conversation changes if the Mets just land one of these guys somehow, some way, but that has to happen first. And that's what we're skeptical about. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be, it's going to be happening here in the next coming week. So any content that we put up via, long form videos or lives, make sure to hit the notifications buttons and we'll be here covering it. But, we're just trying to make sense of what is what at this point and what the Mets are planning here with the names that are already left on the board, because now your margin for error is infinitely smaller than just a month ago. And if you're playing, that's why I didn't understand. Like I understood the reason why David Stearns didn't go after a guy like Tetsuya Imai, because apparently they didn't think that he was going to be a big, impactful, game-changing pitcher. That deal was sweet that the Astros ended up with, though.
Very sweet.
3 years, opt-outs after every year. That is a Mets David Stearns deal if I ever saw one. And so the fact that that wasn't with the Mets was kind of crazy. I understand the situation of Houston is a lot different and a lot less pressurized with the media or lack of media, et cetera, than New York is. I understand that, especially if you're trying to go back onto the market and also adjust to a new league. That's understandable. But if you're going to use that as the excuse for not even coming close to going after Tetsuya Imai, if he wasn't the impactful pitcher that you didn't have envisioned, you better go out there and get an impactful pitcher, right? That just means that you need to go out there and get somebody who you do think is impactful and not try to sell us that this rotation, running it back is gonna be the way. So that's where I'm at. We'll see what happens moving forward. There's a lot of speculation, not enough evidence of what's going on here. And we'll see what happens. That's really all I got on this fine Sunday morning.
So what you're saying, Chris, is that David Stearns is looking for an impact pitcher, because if you're going to talk about
that's what he said.
Pitcher, then get an impact pitcher, right? Again, smoke and mirrors. Which way is it? Is it blowing smoke up everybody's ass, saying, "Oh, we're going to use these prospects and maybe hyping them up," like Brian Cashman does a great job in hyping up all his prospects so we can trade him away, because he's going to make a trade. And that's the other thing, Chris. The Yankees are going to get one of these pitchers. I'm telling you this right now. They're going to make a trade for one of these pitchers. If it's Peralta, I don't know if it's Scuba, but Peralta or somebody else. We talk, and obviously we know this, but we talk sometimes like the Mets are the only team in Major League Baseball looking for a starting pitcher to trade for. Right? We're not the only team. And it only takes one team to outbid David Stearns, which is not very hard, as we've seen these last couple of years. So that's the issue too.
The last thing that I'll say here in this comment by Elvin is pure gold. Great comment. Like, we're talking about these prospects playing a lot, and that's fine, and that's great, right? But Elvin says, counting on Benge to be a starter and produce at the major league level right out of the gate is irresponsible and just as absurd to count on McLean to be an ace on opening day. Bingo. That is correct.
What we talk about.
Right. So the reason why you go ahead and make these moves is not just to make your team better, but it's to take off the pressure of these young guys and actually have them develop in the correct space and environment and not have that pressure in their rookie seasons. That's why you make these moves as well. Yes, to get better, but also to enhance the development of these prospects and not have them be the guys from day one.
Correct.
That's that's a great comment. 100% agree. I think I'll end my talking on this stream with that. That's really it. That's a great comment.
Yeah, that's a great comment, actually, Alvin. Great job. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. So until something goes down and we see what it is. Again, if it's Lucas Giolito, I think we know the rest of the offseason is going to look like at this point. But yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think we talked about this many times. We both agreed with that comment from Elvis. That Elvis, that's the thing, is the fact that you have to do something, because it's just you can't. Again, if the Mets weren't good and they don't have no stars, and they're just going through the motions, then all these young kids make sense, and the pressure is not really that big because, there's hope, but everybody's going to watch to see if they can develop. Not when you have Soto and Lindor. It doesn't work. Nolan McLean pitching on opening day, that's a ton of pressure. Not saying he can't handle it, but again, if he takes one step back, this rotation is destroyed. That's it. It's a fact. Without anybody who's proven and not currently on the Mets to be on this rotation. So, Chris, before we go, you got any picks for the NFL playoffs today? A couple of games? Obviously not in it. God forbid they are. But
those games yesterday were phenomenal. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, the Bears to do what they did in that second half is crazy.
What the Panthers? I live in Carolina now. The Panthers, man, they showed something.
They did. I think they picked up Bryce Young's fifth-year option, and rightfully so. He had a good season, so congrats to the Panthers. That's nothing to be ashamed about there. You know what? These are my picks for today. I'll take the Jags at home. I'll take the Niners on the road, and I'll take the Patriots at home too. Those are my picks today. So we'll see what happens.
So the Eagles can just die. I don't care.
I'll never pick the Eagles. Yeah, exactly. I hate that organization. I hate that organization.
I'm a Giants fan. I'm a Cowboys fan, so we hate the Eagles. I'm going with the Jags too. I think the Bills are going to get their ass kicked, to be quite honest with you.
They don't do well on the road in the playoffs, from what I understand.
And the Jags defense is really good, so it's going to be interesting. Jags, Niners, and I'm gonna have the upset the Chargers. I don't know why. I just think, I just hate the Patriots. I don't like them either. So it's like
Drake May season though. Yeah, I don't like the Patriots either, but
oh yeah, I know, but shit. So again, guys, this is an awesome early morning hot stove. Well, not really early morning, but it's the morning for the hot stove. These are also great times. I know it's hard without schedules to do these morning shows. It's awesome. If we can do one on the weekend, that would be awesome because it works out perfectly. And everybody seems to like it, and we'll see if we can do it for the rest of the off season, and we'll see how it goes. But with that said, guys, still waiting on January 11th for the Mets to actually pull off something, so we have some type of plan going forward for our New York Mets. About a month away from pitchers and catchers, and that is where we are right now, guys. So subscribe to the channel, guys. Hit that like button. Continue to hit that notification button for our videos and our live streams. Thank you for tuning in to the Mets Hot Stove. Enjoy the playoffs for football, and we'll see you next time, guys. Have a great night, and let's go Mets.
Let's go Mets.
Meet the Mets. Meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life because the Mets are really socking the ball, knocking those home runs over the wall. East side, west side, everybody's coming down to meet the METS Mets.